covering the CSS box model. So I'm picking up where I left off. We have our HTML text here with a little bit of CSS styling to it, but we're going to look at what some CSS does when we look at different organizational structures within our site, as well as dealing with images. So in this example, I'm going to use this box model on a couple different image assets. So to start off, before I started recording, I went ahead and placed two images within my images folder here. So in my folder, I can see that I have, in my images folder, I can see that I have two images in here. So I'm going to go ahead and insert the first one, which is a picture of what the CSS box model represents as an image. To do that, I'm going to create an image tag, which is just IMG, which stands for image. I need to set the source, which is src is equal to, and then I can see that I want to grab my images folder and then CSS box model.png, and then I will close that tag. And that popped in my image for me. Now I want to do a couple things that goes with this image tag. The first would be kind of sizing this image. Right now it's really big. You guys are having a hard time seeing this on here. So I'm simply going to come in here and add a width of 50%. Let's make it a little bit bigger. 50% is a little small. Let's do 75%. Now that's 75% of the normal size of the graphic. In Phoenix, I can tell the size. If I hover over my image, it will give me the aspect ratio of that. So this image is 1998 pixels wide by 796 pixels tall. It is very important when you're sizing images, if you're using code, to not distort the aspect ratio. Do not stretch and warp your images. That is why I put in a percentage as opposed to a defined pixel dimension. We will do more on adding images and working with images in a future video. For now, I'm going to focus on looking at the CSS box model. So in this image, what we see is a really nice representation of the different things you're going to call for in calling CSS around for alignment and spacing. So we see in the center here that we have content. Now the content refers to anything such as a div tag or divider thing, any content, picture, icons, anything that is a span tag. It is your content. Outside of the content is padding. So I have padding. And then if I were to put a border on an image, that would go there. And then I could call for a margin. So let's see what that looks like in practice. Let's put in another picture. I'm going to do an image tag, source. And my other picture that I have is Poppy here, who's a very adorable dog. There she is. So let's look and see what that looks like when we call for padding and a border and margin on this image. So I can do this inline. I can also do it in my style tag. Let's go ahead and put it right in line so it only affects my picture of Poppy here. So inline, I can again write style equals, and I can write margin. If I do just margin, it will apply to the margin of everything on the picture, top, bottom, left, and right. Let's go back and look at what our other options are. If I do margin dash, here I've got some other options. So margin bottom, margin left, margin right, margin top, margin for the entire block, or the end of the block. Those are my options. If I wanted to apply to just the margin, so it'll equally apply to the entire image, I can leave it as just margin. If I wanted to be specific on any side of that content, then I could be more explicit in that instruction. So I'm just going to do margin, colon, and I'm going to give it a pixel dimension of, let's say, 25px, semicolon. And you see how that turned blue right there? That is giving me 25 pixels of margin on all sides of that image. So let's put in a border so we can see the difference of when we add in the padding versus the margin versus the border. So I'm going to type in border, and I'm going to do, you can add different appearances to your border, such as dash, dotted, double line, couple to inset, which goes inside. I'm just going to set it at 3 pixels red, semicolon. And I got excited. I forgot to define the type of line. So because I just want a solid line, I'm going to type in solid, then red, and 3 pixels to make it a little thicker. So what that does when I define the border, I can define the appearance of the line, the color, and then how many pixels thick that border is. So if I said I want to make it blue or purple, now it changes that color. I can make it thicker or thinner. And you see that because I have no padding right now, that border is tight to the image. So let's add some padding and see what that looks like. So I'm going to add some padding, and I'm going to add another 25 pixels of padding just so you can see the difference. There we go. So this really easily demonstrates what the box model looks like. So when I added that padding, it gave space from the image to the border. And then the margin gave space from the border to the edge of the browser screen. It's important when you're calling for those different things to be explicit about where you want a margin versus a padding. Tends to trip students up, so I think this showcases that very nicely. Let's go ahead and play with a couple of these settings just so you can see them in different action. So instead of doing padding all the way around, let's look at what padding top looks like. An extra thing there. There we go. So I added some padding to the top. Now that gave me extra space just on the top of 25 pixels and made everything tight around. So it's like I said, I can mess with things like that. I can add padding in that way. Let's look at a dashed line for my border just to play with some of these settings. Put that space, dashed purple, 3 pixels. And that looks like that. So I've added some different styling. It's fairly interesting. It's a little bit different. Now let's look at what I could do as far as putting this as an in document up here in my style tag as opposed to just an inline style. Scoot that over so we can see a little bit better. So I'm going to cut some of this out. And there's Poppy by herself. Now when that was inline, it only applied to that. Because I have multiple image tags, and if I wanted to call it, I could call IMG, and that CSS would apply to everything in the document. You see how that now applied up here? So if I wanted to have that apply to just the one image, I could add an ID to this image. For right now, we're not going to worry about calling for an ID. I'm okay with this applying. Maybe I want it to consistently apply. So calling for the image, opening and closing brackets, margin 25, border, dashed purple, padding, top. There is another way that you can call padding and margin. If you said, I don't want to write padding top, padding bottom, padding right, padding left to call for different measurements, you can actually do a short code in here. When you do these short measurements, so if I said padding is 25 pixels, 5px, 13px, we'll just switch it up, and 8 pixels. That put in some funky spacing, but what I've done is just said, all right, I need padding, and I want to apply different measurements to each side of the image. So when I did that, it's applying 25 pixels to the top, 5 pixels to the right, 13 to the bottom, and 8 pixels to the left in a shortened version. I could get the same thing by doing padding top 25 pixels, semicolon, padding right 5 pixels, semicolon, padding bottom 13 pixels. This is just a shortened way of expressing this to have different measurements of padding or margin. You can do the same thing with the margin so to speed up your coding work. So again, it's going to always measure, if you're doing this shortened version, it's always going to go top, right, bottom, left. It's going to start at the top and go clockwise. So if you're trying to define the measurements, that's how you know. If you wanted something to be 0, you can always put in 0. I can even do a shortened version of that. If I only put in 2, it will apply top and bottom as 25, right and left as 0. So if I wanted something just top and bottom to be the same or right and left to be the same, you can do it shortened. So this is now top and bottom. This is now right and left. So that's important to mess around with, play with, and understand how these things are working out and how you can quickly add some of these padding, borders, and margins to any of your content. Thank you for watching this video, and we will see you on the next one.